Welcome to Soul Rising. We're your hosts, Amy and Erin. We're two everyday mediums who are passionate about taking the woo-woo out of spirituality and bringing it down to earth. So put the kettle on, grab a chair, and join us. Hey everyone!
Welcome back to episode 47.
Episode 47 of Soul Rising Podcast. Nice to see you.
It's been
nice
a while.
To see you out there.
Yeah.
It's been a while. It's been a month.
Yeah. For Amy and I, not for you guys. For you guys, we've been, we were here just last week. Or just this past week.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, this is, we're coming up on our 1 year anniversary of this podcast. I will find out the exact date, but, yeah, a year, I think in early November, I want to say. I don't know why, but the 5th keeps coming in my mind. So maybe it was November 5th. We'll have to go back and check. Yeah, something around that time of year, which makes sense for me too, because, I was just sharing that like this time of year, I'm becoming aware of my natural patterns and cycles, and that I don't mean like physically. I just mean like in general, like energetically. I seem to come alive in the fall, and I seem to be productive and want to create things in the fall. The fall and the winter is like creative time. And then, which might be opposite of most people, right? Because then spring, I start to slow down, and the summer, I get really quiet, which is the very opposite of like what you would think. But for me, it's like I've been noticing how creative I am and how I just have all this stuff to say and all this stuff to do. And yeah, so it's been good for me so far.
That's good. I love the fall personally. It's like my favorite time. I like the summer too, but I think I feel similarly to you, where I feel more, I don't know, alive, energized a little bit. I don't know why that is. Maybe because the energy like collectively is a lot. Maybe other mediums and intuitives feel the same way, and maybe everybody collectively is like dimming down a little bit. And so we're like, oh, we feel great. I don't know what it is. Yeah.
It's funny because I've talked to other people about this, and it's yeah, there's people that love fall too, right? But I don't mean just aesthetically. Like I mean literally like energetically something changes within me. But it's funny because the couple people that I've asked are like, oh no, like I feel that way about summer. And I'm like, oh, okay, I don't at all. So I don't know, but it also brings me to mind like that kind of like witchy energy, which makes sense for today because we're going to talk all about witches. But like the witches love this time.
Well, I was just going to say, I wonder if it's that energy that you're picking up on, of maybe there's something to do with this time of year, going into like harvest, kind of it's harvest season, right? So maybe you're harvesting.
Maybe I am. Interesting too. Like I as I learn about human design, which I know we've talked about on a past episode, but my like unconscious side of the chart, right? There's conscious and unconscious. My unconscious side of the chart is all Libra energy. So it's all like right now. So, and I think that maybe yours is too, because our birthdays are around the same time. So that to me, once I learned all of that and all of, the gates, which we won't talk about today, but all of those things that are in Libra season, I was like, maybe that's why I come alive, because that energy is literally being activated and expressed within me. And then my birthday's in January. So I've got those two parts, the fall and the winter. So I'm curious, maybe it has to do with that too.
Yeah,
maybe.
Could be. I don't know.
Could be.
I feel the same. Like I've always loved December because it's also my birthday. But
yes,
I just like, I don't know. I love the winter. I love cozy season.
Me too.
Just like,
I love cozy season.
Yeah, right? Sweater weather.
Yeah.
Remember that SNL skit?
Yes, sweater weather.
Yes. Sweater weather.
I love sweater weather. I don't like sweating weather. That's what I'll say. I don't like sweating weather, but I love sweater weather.
I would rather be cold. I am definitely that person who would rather be cold. Yeah.
Me too. I can put on a sweater.
Yeah. I want to get cozy under blankets.
Cold air. I like to breathe cold air. I do. It's just something with like, even if I'm in a car in the winter, my husband knows better now than to turn on the heat really in the winter, unless he'll turn on the heat and I'll still roll down the window. But if I'm in somebody else's car, like that, maybe like I don't feel as comfortable to say like turn off the flipping heat. I can't stand it. I feel like I can't breathe when the heat's on in the car to breathe cold air in. Yeah, yeah, it's funny. Nothing better than being in your warm bed with like loads of blankets on top and the window open a crack and the cold air comes.
Yeah, we
That's
might
my
get a
idea of
cold,
heaven.
but I would agree. I would rather do that than like it's just not. I don't like being sticky, and in Ontario too, guys. Like it's muggy. Okay, it's not like it's nice hot weather. It's muggy.
It's not dry heat. It's like moist. Yeah, yeah, it's gross. I'm thinking about like when I was a teenager, the boyfriend I had at the time, he always stuck his pillow like in between the screen and the window. Every day when he got up, he'd put his pillow in there, and then at night he'd take it out so it was cold when he went to
You know what? Something to
sleep.
that.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, good idea. It's in my noggin now. It's in my brain. I'm
Yeah.
gonna.
I'm like thinking to myself, this will come so in handy once I go through the change of life. And I'm like dying. Speaking of the change of life, I just read a book about 2 weeks ago called The Change. And it was so good, Erin, and I think that you would love it so much. I wish it was down here with me. Um, I will share more information about that maybe to come because I don't have the book with me, but it is so the change. And just to give a brief kind of synopsis, it's about three different women all in their kind of midlife 40s moving into 50s time, where they go through big changes in their lives and through that discover their kind of magical powers and solve murders in their town.
Okay,
And
I
it
would.
was
It's
so
definitely
good.
up my alley. You're right. This
It's
is.
so
I would eat
good.
this
It's
book up.
so
The
good.
change. Okay,
Yeah.
I've got to keep that in mind. Please let me know after the podcast. I'm going to.
Yeah. It's newish. Yeah, it's newish, like this year newish. And funny enough, well, I'm excited because I shared in my story about it one day, and then I don't know if it was the author or the like her assistant, but whoever it was liked my story, shared it, and then said, "Hey, on this date, if you want to join the author and do like we're doing like it's not like one.
But it's like a Q&A kind of thing.
It's on. It's tomorrow. It's tomorrow night.
Amy, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Okay, you have to let us know how it goes. But isn't that so fun?
So fun. I've never done that before, actually. And but I'm like, I'll do it for this book because I think it's really cool. And I will also say, without giving too much away, there's a little bit of a spiritual mediumship lens to this book too.
See, I love that because I feel like too often we hear stories of like, 16 going in, or like early 20s, or like, you know what I mean, 30s finding out their own inner power. And I don't feel like we hear enough stories about older women. Does that make
Real
sense?
women.
Yeah. Coming into their power. Because I feel like what a time. Yeah.
And all of these women, like without giving too much away, but like almost feel a little bit like discarded or left behind from life, which I know is a commonality with women when we become a certain age and things happen. The kids leave the nest potentially, maybe marriages end, maybe, I don't know, whatever happens.
Right? Like society has told us like getting old is bad.
Yes. And a lot of us will then go, okay, and we kind of go in, but it's actually the time when I feel like internally we actually grow and expand and become who we've.
I totally agree. I mean, Amy, like I feel like I've shared this with you before. Like yes, I do mediumship and I still love it, but I also have this other like work that I'm doing, right? Um, but I've always imagined myself as an older, like retired woman giving readings, like being that weird kooky woman. Like that's who I feel like.
That's what you do, like post retirement. Yeah. Yeah. You know what though? You are with your human design. I can't remember everything about it, but one thing I do remember is about your profile type. Is about those kind of three parts of life, and that you are somebody that like in that later phase of life then uses all of the stuff from before and becomes who they always were meant to be, like literally, like that's your profile type, so I can see how you would intuitively know that anyways. You're like, yeah, I'm going to get all this stuff done just because I need to get it done. But then, yeah, this is who I really want to be. I see myself like that too. I know that I'm 10 years closer to that than you are, like in terms of age, but I see that too. Like when I imagine my future self, I see a woman with very long gray hair, which I think is one of those things too that women are starting to do. I'm not suggesting that like every older woman should have long hair, but I feel like in the past, even talking to my mother or my grandmother, sometimes like they have felt that they should cut their hair when they get a certain age because older women just don't have long hair. And I'm like, says who? So I am going to certainly have my hair long.
I'm like you. I've always envisioned myself older woman, long gray hair, hopefully, you know. Um,
Barefoot
yeah,
in the garden.
outside in my like garden house because I have a greenhouse. I don't know why, but I have a greenhouse.
Yeah.
Which I'm excited actually to talk as we talk about witches because I know there's different kind of areas, right, of witchcraft and different um, things that people can, witches that's different areas, right, that witches can study or identify with, like a green witch that uses primarily um, uh, like herbal, right, like plant based. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, let's just get right into it. So today, I was taking the lead kind of with the background research, and then we're going to present it and chat about it and share. Now, I didn't talk much about the different kinds of witches, which is okay because maybe that's something that you want to talk about or share as we go. For me, I spent a lot of time talking about or learning about the archetype of the witch. So I'll start with the archetype of the witch and the concept that the witch plays into that, as well as share some history about witches and witchcraft and a little bit about the religion of Wicca.
Yay!
Yeah, so I'm excited too. Okay, all right. So I do have like a little prompter right here with my notes. So if you see my eyes going back and forth, if you're here on YouTube, that's what I'm doing. So the archetype is of the witch is one of the most popular archetypes that we see in fiction. The witch archetype is also often used to depict a wicked or an evil character who possesses great power and is genuinely feared by society. The sage, magician, and earth mother are similar to the witch archetype in terms of the Jung archetype. So Carl Jung, who was a prominent psychologist. So the Jungian, he created like a bunch of archetypes that were reflective kind of the collective unconscious, right? Like, so all of our kind of inside underneath. So the Jungian archetypes of personality were chosen by Carl Jung as the foundation of characters. They are the foundation of characters in movies, literature, art, and the lives we live. So essentially, like everything, every TV show, every movie, if you really start to learn about the archetypes, you'll see the archetypes in each character, right? There is that pattern in everything. And in life, in our lives as well. It's kind of amazing, actually, when you start learning about archetypes. They represent the behavioral patterns, cultural symbols, and images of the collective unconscious. I also want to say my source for some of this is natalier.co. And I'll put that in the show notes. Young's, yeah, Young's unconscious definition. So his definition of what the collective unconscious is. It was a term introduced by psychiatrist Carl Jung to represent a form of the unconscious. That's the part of the mind containing memories and impulses of which the individual is not aware. Right. So this is that like subconscious, the parts of us that we don't always, we're not always aware of. They common to mankind as a whole and originating in the inherited structure of the brain. So these, like I said, the inherited behaviors of the collective. Jung's theory of the unconscious is often that the collective unconscious is expressed through these 12 archetypes, the witch being one of these. I feel like Erin's screen is frozen, so I'm going to continue to go on and read and hope that she joins us in one moment. So what I found was really neat. I found this whole website about archetypes. Again, it was that same website we just talked about, which was www.natelier.ca. Just spelling it out rather than trying to pronounce it. And the author has broken down each archetype in a really understandable way. She says that the witch or the magician is constantly growing and changing. Okay, so this is the archetype. They do this for themselves, but also for others. Okay, so the archetype of the witch is always growing and changing, personally for themselves, but also helping others to do the same thing. There's this feeling of like transformation that comes through with the witch energy and archetype. They are a healer often, although the information that they synthesize for them, they are a healer through the information that they synthesize for themselves. Okay, so this would be like taking something that's perceived negative and kind of transmuting it into something that would be more positive. So it's like this, that's a transformation, right? That synthesis that comes through. They're deeply intuitive and can tend to be negative if they become too absorbed in their regeneration. So that's like, a tale that we all can we can all resonate with. I think when we become too kind of absorbed in the process of that, sometimes maybe we would be too focused on the negative at times, right? So the archetype of the witch is one of the most popular archetypes that we would see in fiction, really. The witch archetype is often used to depict a wicked or an evil character who possesses great power and is genuinely, why can't I say it? Generally, feared by society, maybe genuinely too, but I was trying to say generally. The same magician and the Earth Mother archetypes are similar to the witch archetype, and sometimes can be kind of combined, but because Jungian didn't have an actual archetype called the witch, but it is like the magician, the sage. It's the same thing with a different word.
Okay, I didn't know that. That's cool.
So when I talk about Jung, this was Carl Jung, the prominent psychiatrist that a lot of us would know of. So he created these what he called Jungian archetypes, and they are archetypes of personality. They're the foundations of the characters in our movies, literature, art, and the lives we live. We see it in everything. If we studied all the archetypes, we'd be able to see them in every movie, every play, every TV show. There's always somebody playing a certain role. So these are the collective unconsciousness is essentially, it was a term coined by Carl Jung to represent the form of unconscious. So that's the part of us that we're not aware of. That contains memories and impulses of which the individual is not aware. And these are all common to humankind as a whole and originate in the inherited structure of the brain. So we just kind of inherit these archetypes and these understandings of it, and our world is like a play that acts it out, right? I love that too, because
all the world's a stage.
I love it too, because I've heard of so many, like I've read before of different people like that their last words were like, oh, it was all a play. It was all a play. Like I've heard that a few times that people have said that. So his theory of unconscious is that the collective unconscious is expressed through these 12 archetypes. Okay. I found a really neat website about archetypes, and I will spell the website out. It's natelier.co. And this is a website that I will refer to as I talk about the archetypes itself, because it's where I found some of the information. So the author has broken down each archetype in a really understandable way, and I really appreciate it. So if you are somebody that's curious and interested in learning about the archetypes, maybe in not reading, the Jungian text, which sometimes can be a lot wordy, a little bit of a mouthful, you might want to visit that website, which I will remember to put in the show notes. So she says the witch or the magician is constantly growing and changing. That's part of the central part of the witch and the magician archetype. They do this for themselves. So internally, always growing, always changing, very like transformative kind of energy with the witch. They also can do this for others. They are healers through the information that they synthesize for themselves. So again, with that transformational kind of essence, where they're taking something and they're making it into something else. They're alchemists, right? They are deeply intuitive and can tend to be negative if they become too absorbed in their regeneration. So I found that interesting. I guess that's that little ego piece, right? Like if you're too focused on that, maybe either a little ego pops in, you might become a little bit too absorbed. And maybe that's more of the shadow aspect of the witch archetype that we see sometimes, where, because, you know, a lot of the stories when we think about the witch started out maybe as a lovely, kind healer, white witch, and then was hurt and turned into more of the negative, like I'm going to hide and, be to myself. So maybe that's part of what they meant by that. I personally resonate with the witch very strongly because I spend a lot of time working on changing and improving my mental and physical health in order to show up in the world as the best version of myself. So the author of this website, she says, I ultimately hope that through the work that I do on myself, I will be able to help others heal as well. If we can all show up as our best selves, imagine the incredible things we can accomplish. I agree. Ditto. That's something that I feel like we feel quite strongly about. So yeah, hands up. So the thing that I liked about this website, also was that she broke it down. She broke things down. So she said the motto of the witch archetype, I can make things happen. The core desire of the witch, understanding the fundamental laws of the universe. The goal, to make dreams come true. The greatest fear, unintended negative consequences. Unintended. I want to, unintended. Let's focus on that. Strategy, develop a vision and live by it. Weakness, becoming manipulative. Talent, finding win-win situations, the alchemy there. The witch is also known as the magician, the visionary, the catalyst, the inventor, the charismatic leader, the shaman, the healer, and the medicine man or woman. So I love that. I can think about different characters and things in which you would see that. Is there like something that comes to mind as I talk about the archetype of the witch for you?
Well, I love it because when we see like the like it in movies, it always has been this like very like all of a sudden here comes a very powerful woman and that's scary. Like that's the fearful part. And even when we look at movies like The Craft, which is a really good one, I think, you can kind of see how they're like really kind of coming into this their like power, this confidence piece. And I do think that actually that ego part that you just talked about is definitely portrayed in that movie, because we see one of the characters, right, she gets so wrapped up in it, and it ultimately causes her own demise. But I love the idea of the witch, because I think the thing that is the fearful part of the witch is that it's a powerful woman.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, like that's like for me, like that I think is the essence
The
of.
powerful woman. Yeah. Yeah. And I'll talk more about that too, like when we get into the history a little bit and even with Wicca. Yeah, me too. I agree. So the following information comes from Psychology Today. So I just wanted to let you know that among the archetypes, the witch is has a fascinating future. When someone calls another a witch, we know exactly what they mean. The witch has powers. She is uncanny and unholy. She lives outside the borders of civilization and has been ostracized because her ways stand in opposition to accepted values, thus challenging our own impulse to conform. To not conform, especially as a woman, puts us at risk of being called a witch or the rhyming word that begins with a B. The witch reminds us that there may well be unnameable and untamable aspects of ourselves, where passions stagnate and fester. What parts of us don't fit into the conventional idealized feminine? It's interesting too, right? Because I feel like, this kind of speaks to even like the history of witchcraft and witch trials and things, like when somebody is wise and self-governing and has that sovereignty, it can trigger another that doesn't feel safe enough to do that for themselves, or doesn't feel like they could do it themselves. And I think you see this too in some dynamics with women. Like we've all heard, I remember one of my jobs, I worked at a clothing store, and it was just a laughing joke. It's like, oh, you got 15 women in here, what a cat fight. And I was like, but why does it have to be, right? It doesn't have to be. But sometimes that dynamic comes out where one person may have kind of a strong personality, and it can trigger. I think it's meant to trigger to help facilitate the growth so that the other person can stand in their power too. But I think that sometimes we don't see it for that, and we kind of just go, oh, cat fight, right? Like that's just women.
And because it's a group of women, it's considered a catfight. But if a group of men were to get together, they would just be considered, oh, they're just being.
Right. Right. Exactly. Right. Yeah, I know. Why is it a cat fight if women get together and have opinions, right? um Yeah. So another question that I'm just going to put out there is, do we harbor an urge that wishes to transgress and to cross the borders of our own perceived, self? Historically, innocent women have been tortured and killed because the prevailing masculine ruled and feared female sexuality.
Did you ever hear about, sorry, Amy, just to like, this just made me think about when a woman was having hysteria. They would, I think it was, it used to be in the, like the medical, whatever, the medical dictionary, like way back when, forget the time period. But when a woman was in hysteria, i.e., maybe she spoke up, maybe she didn't want to have sex, maybe, right? There's like so many things that could have gone on. Mass hysteria. Do you know what they would do to like to help that woman? Basically use a vibrator, and they would,
Like as if that was the right. Oh my God.
like, they were like, we'll fix this, here's your vibrator. And they, but and this was like men doing this, like it's anyways.
There's a lot of when I was reading about witchcraft too, and some of the things that the women went through, a lot of it was very sexually pervasive, and would be considered rape. Like they were stripped down, like why, right? Like to inspect and to check things, and yeah, it's just terrible, terrible, terrible. And these are the things that are still within our collective unconsciousness and still remain, right? I can see it in our world. It's interesting because recently, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks ago, I made a reel on Instagram that was talking about the witch wound, right? Which is this, and how how it might show up in the world, and how we can kind of work through it by standing in our power and speaking our truth and not hiding. And I didn't mean in the sense of like, just witches. I mean just in people in general, right? Because men also carry the witch wound, right? So it's not just women. And I had this nasty comment come through from a man, and he was like, why don't you go get an effing job? And I responded, thank you so much. You've just proven my point. This is the witch wound in action. You are a man. I don't know. You don't know me. You don't follow me. We've never talked before. And you feel you have the authority to tell me, because I am speaking my truth and speaking out, to tell me off and to try to shame me and make me feel bad about myself. I don't think so. So I'm just like, you just left a comment there. I'm like, everybody, let's do this.
Thank you for proving my point. Yeah, good. I was gonna say, did you leave the comment there? Because good.
You proved my point. But that's the way in which it can show up in our lifetimes as well.
It still is here. There's still been like men's groups that are like, there was like this one, I don't know, like story. I think he's like actually kicked out, or there's something that happened, but there was a guy from another country. He came to Canada, and it was like basically like how to sleep with women. I can't remember like the details of the story. He was teaching it. And I think there was like a lawsuit or so, anyways, but he's not, I don't think he's allowed back here. But it's a thing. It happens. There's still like awful, anyways.
Yeah, yeah. So the witch archetype in medieval times. Let's talk about this first. So this is from, the source is knowyourarchetypes.com. Witches were seen as the healers in our societies, sought out for their abilities to cure people of their physical and mental ailments. Okay, and I wrote in my notes, draw the connection here between ancient indigenous customs and the way women were treated in Lemuria. We talked about Lemuria last week. The women were the healers. They were revered. They were respected. The men would come to them. Is this a good time to fish? Where should we go? Right? They were the wise women. And that's just the way that it has been. So even when you think about Wicca, which we're going to talk about, which was the old religion, the one that predates all the others, the women were revered as the healers, right? And you see that also in indigenous culture from before as well, shamans and things like that. Although I think shaman is a mainly male term now. I think mainly. I don't know.
I feel like there's some.
There's still female. I'm not saying there's not female shamans, but I just feel like I don't know what I read. There was something that made me feel like it's often used in a masculine.
Like maybe it was used as a, yeah, okay.
So you see in medieval times, the witch archetype was revered, respected. You're a healer. I need help. Okay, I'm going to come to you. Their so-called magical powers were seen as positive forces for the good of society rather than something to be feared. They were revered for their wisdom, knowledge, and intuition, with people seeking them out in times of trouble. They were embraced as valuable and a cherished part of their community rather than shunned. So you think about like indigenous cultures, and like we're talking like, yes, still somewhat, but in the past as well, where the people, the medicine women, the medicine men, the shamans, the elders that held this kind of wisdom would be taken care of. They would be provided shelter and food, and people would take care of them because they were so highly respected. So that's where we started, with this intuitive kind of ability way back when. They were even acknowledged for their sacredness and abilities in creating and preserving life. So that was respected and revered as well. So it says the witch archetype and the natural world. So once things became a little bit more, I don't want to say civilized because it was anything but civilized, but you know what I mean. When
As we go through to forward.
Yeah, so
yeah.
the focus was on the natural world and as the source of their knowledge and power, seeking the answers which they needed in order to be able to heal the physical, mental, and spiritual ailments of those around them. However, the change in the way that the witch was viewed came as the world around them turned away from the belief in the power of the natural and the spiritual world and towards the patriarchal society that we know today. So we just kind of moved away from it, where we lost our connection with the natural world in a way. I think that we're still working on that and turn towards doing, creating, being. Yeah. Patriarchy. As this change took place, the world of the feminine and nature, which was which the witch represented, came to represent darkness, danger, and evil. Because, right, of course, and because somebody said, okay, we can't have that anymore. This is what's powerful. So we need to, it's othering, it's alienating. It's what we still see today in people targeting certain groups of people and making them dangerous and other, and, and they're not, but you've created this facade. The male rulers of the new modern style of society, patriarchal, feared the power and sovereignty which witches displayed over their communities, which they were trying to control. So they led campaigns to demonize them. This would, the famous trials in England and America. And this is when the archetypal witch, which we are familiar with, became secured and locked in the collective unconscious. Isn't that interesting? So now the witch in the modern world, the modern witch is a woman in touch with spirits or gods and thus imbued with tremendous power, as she represents feminine power. I think we're moving into this. When associated with the modern woman, this is often related to their unwillingness to conform to mainstream rules of society, their eccentricity, or their apparently immoral behavior, which then leads others to label them as a witch. Leading into the untamed woman. The archetypal witch is also associated with the aspects of a woman which are untamed. I love it too because Glennon Doyle's book, Untamed. She is aware of her power to destroy as well as her power to create balance. Yeah, I love it. Do you want me to keep going? Do you have anything to...
Yeah, no. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting too, right? Like this all makes sense, but it's interesting to see how it was something, it turned into something because somebody told us, and then it's starting to change back, I think, hopefully. Um,
I think so too. I think we saw that too, especially like, I mean, I just for some reason I feel like in the 90, like we just kind of saw that with the craft a little bit. Like
yeah,
I felt it was showed a little
like
bit of
Sabrina
that.
the Teenage
Yeah.
Witch. That was the 90s
Sabrina the
too.
Teenage
Yeah, Hocus
Witch,
Pocus.
my favorite. I loved Sabrina.
Yeah, yeah. It started almost to become a little bit trendy. Like I think it was just like reemerging into the unconscious as, hey, let's like question this, let's work through, yeah, let's redefine this, what is this. So the witch archetype, some characteristics and traits. The archetypal witch is associated with a very clear physical image in the minds of most people, yes, which have been perpetuated by their prevalence in film and television culture over the past culture, or sorry, over the past century. The green face, the warty long nose, the hat, the hag with her long, like skinny little
Yeah,
fingers.
we
Yeah,
think
yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
what's that movie? Oh my God, Wizard of Oz.
Yes. Yeah.
Wizard
Yeah.
of Oz. We see like the bad witch, then we see
Yeah.
the good witch.
It's funny you mentioned the Good Witch too. Like is Glinda or Glenda? I think it's Glinda. Yeah, so I think it's Glinda. This book that I'm reading that I'll mention in a little bit is called The Book of Shadows by Phyllis Carrot. She mentions that, like just how really the Good Witch is more what witchcraft and what Wicca is all about. It's when she says, you've always had the power, you just had to discover that you did. I'm butchering the sentence, but you've already always had the power. You just had to believe that you did. Yeah, that's really what it's all about.
Yes, that's which is very true.
That's what it's
Yeah.
all about. Yeah. So in such stories where the witch appears, they are often usually the antagonist of the story set up in opposition to the protagonist hero. So it's that good versus evil. Often the backstory of the witch is presented, and in this, they are told to have once been good witches who have turned to the dark side when something traumatic has happened to them. Such witches are able to cast spells, often using tools such as a magic wand to do so. They are often very ugly in appearance with old and wrinkled skin, large noses, warts, and gray, wispy, unkept hair. Their skin is sometimes described as green, gray, or pale in color. It's almost like lifeless when you think about them, right? Um, they often have missing teeth and pointy nails. They are often clothed in black outfits. They ride on broomsticks and often possess cauldrons, which they use to brew potions to see the future or to cast spells. Their laugh is described as a cackle. I love this because my husband always says I'm a cackle, and I'm like, are you trying to tell me that I'm a witch?
What are you
What are
saying,
you
Scott?
really saying here? Um, they live in isolation, often in the depths of a forest, and often with a black cat as the only source of companionship. Where's Ned?
That's why I love cats, maybe.
I've got my guy over here too. So yeah, witches and their cats. Many are described as being able to talk to animals. Speaking of which, I was over here talking to my cat before we recorded.
It's true, you were like, do you
Do
need
you,
any?
do you need me to like open the back door for the litter box? Are you good? And like just expecting him to answer me, which he did. I know he did. They are all evil. They have evil hearts, and they take pleasure in causing mayhem and mischief in the world. Yes, we see that in so many different movies. So many different movies. Have you seen the new Hocus Pocus?
I did.
What'd you think? Wasn't your favorite?
I mean, obviously,
Not as good as the other.
for like nostalgic purposes, not as good as the first one. It was a fun time.
Yeah, I liked it.
I had fun. I didn't hate it.
I didn't hate it either. I think too, like sometimes because that came out at such a time, like it's nostalgia, like childhood nostalgia. So I think sometimes you look back and you see things through like rose-colored glasses too. Like if that movie came out right now, we might not be as impressed. I don't know.
And you know what though? The same was true with Hocus Pocus when it first came out. It was not popular, didn't do well, and then it just became.
It's nostalgia, right? So it's like maybe the kids today that were like that are young now in 20 years will be like, oh my god, Hocus Pocus. Yeah.
All these different. It's like that with. I feel that way with High School Musical a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Does that kind of make sense? I listen. I've never like. I've actually never seen High School Musical, so nobody at me. But I, I feel like it was this kind of just came out. Nobody knew how it would do, and then I think like over time it's become more popular, and that's like I hear a lot of people younger than me talk about
Just the nostalgia. Yeah.
nostalgia. Yeah,
Or like I'm thinking about like Christmas movies and things like that too, where I'm like, they're like really terrible, but like they're so good at the same time.
yeah, you
Yeah.
can't help it,
Yeah, you
right?
can't help it. That's a power of memories too, right? Like that's a good memory, but you got to also think when something's perceived as negative, that that imprints as a memory, right? As a that's the collective unconscious, right? That's what we're carrying through even now. So the history of witches we're going to get into. This is a source from history.com, and I'm paraphrasing here, so some of these are my words, some of them come from history.com. So the early beliefs on witches were that they were women who practiced witchcraft using magic spells and calling on spirits for help or to bring about positive change. Most witches were thought to be pagans who were doing the devil's work. This belief stemmed from early Christian beliefs in Europe. Most, however, were simply natural healers or so-called wise women whose choice of profession was misunderstood. Yes, 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 yes. One of the earliest historical records of witches in the Bible was in the book of Samuel, thought to be written between 931 BC and 721 BC. It tells the story of when King Saul sought the witch of Endor to summon the dead prophet Samuel's spirit. To summon the dead prophet Samuel's spirit to help him defeat the army. The witch is said to have roused Samuel, who then prophesied the death of Saul and his sons. And the next day, according to the Bible, Saul's sons died in battle and Saul committed suicide. Other Old Testament versions condemn witches, such as Exodus 22:18, which says, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." Interestingly enough, I was just on Facebook scrolling through something and I saw an ad for somebody like who was it was offering like tarot classes or something like that. You know how you can see ads for things like join my master class or whatever. And I was reading in the comments. I don't know why I was doing this because you should never read the comments. And I literally saw the comment, "Thou shall not suffer a witch to live." This was like 2 days ago. Yeah.
But you know what's interesting though? Like, did you see that article or that video of that woman who in the States who really believes that
The Hocus
the
Pocus
witches
2 movie. Yes.
focus are actually casting spells like you don't know what's yeah.
Save the children. I'm like, I know. I'm just like, okay, no, like let's not I don't want to bash other people's beliefs, right? But at the same time, I'm just like, that is a really good example of what we're talking about here today. Yeah, a little bit ridiculous. It was also aired on Fox, so let's just leave it at that.
Bless them.
Yeah, bless. Witch hysteria really took hold in Europe in the mid 1400s. So this is when the patriarchal. So when we moved from seeing witches as healers, wise women, and all of a sudden,
Yeah, we're seeing more of like the
push.
yeah, Christianity coming into play, right? And it's this idea of
Became when many accused witches so this is when many accused witches confessed under torture to a variety of wicked behaviors. Within a century, witch hunts were common, and most of the accused were executed by burning at the stake or hanging. Single women, widows, and other women on the margins of society were especially targeted. I was reading that it was the majority of like older women, more older women than young. I mean, obviously we know like the ones we know about.
like the ones that are documented. Think about everything that's
Well,
not,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But
In this book, I think they were saying like 900,000 estimated people, women. Between 1500 and 1660, up to 80,000 to 90,000 suspected witches were put to death in Europe. Around 80% were women who were accused to be in cahoots with the devil. Germany has the highest witchcraft execution rate, while Ireland had the lowest.
huh.
Interesting, right?
That is interesting actually.
I don't know how to pronounce this, but the publication of Malleus Maleficarum. Have you heard of this book before? Malleus. Okay, it's MalleusMaleficarum. I am not pronouncing it right, but I've heard of this book. I've seen it written. I'll tell you a little bit about it. It was written by two well-respected people in 1468, which is thought to be the catalyst or what spurred the witch mania to begin in the first place. This book title loosely translated to The Hammer of Witches and was a guide on how to identify, hunt, and interrogate witches. This book quickly became the authority for Protestants and Catholics trying to rid witches from their communities. For more than 100 years, the book sold more copies of any other book on earth except the Bible. Yeah. As witch hysteria decreased in Europe, it increased in America. Reeling from wars, a smallpox epidemic, and the ongoing fear of attacks from Native American tribes, the atmosphere was perfect breeding grounds for finding a scapegoat. The Salem witch trials began when a 9 and 11-year-old girl began suffering from fits, body contortions, and uncontrolled screaming. Today it is believed that they were poisoned by a fungus that caused spasms and delusions.
Is this the Bell Witch?
I didn't find that, but this was Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, and Tituba.
Okay.
So this was said to be the beginning of the Salem witch trials. So mass hysteria ensued, and 3 women were accused of witchcraft: Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, and Tituba. Tituba confessed to being a witch. So she was a slave, okay? So she confessed to being a witch and began accusing others of using black magic. On June 10th, Bridget Bishop became the first accused witch to be put to death during the Salem witch trials. Ultimately, 150 people were accused, 18 of them put to death. 6 men were also convicted and executed. Yeah, isn't that interesting? I think it goes to show, like when I read breeding grounds, when I talked about that, I'm like, yes. And right now I feel like there's just so much going on in the world. This is the perfect atmosphere for breeding ground for fear as well, right? I think we're seeing that.
Well, you can see how quickly it spreads, right? And I mean, granted, like without getting too much into it, but we kind of saw that with COVID, right? We saw it during the pandemic and how quickly fear really spread, and that how, not to put complete blame on it, but that the media, you know what I mean? I don't think it definitely helped. I absolutely, like, we were in a pandemic, there was a disease. I'm not denying that, but I think we saw a lot of fear with that, right? Too.
Yeah, and the media perpetuated it. And it's funny you say that, because just yesterday I was talking to my mom, and she said, I mean, there's still a lot of that floating around right now. It's like it's resurging. And she was asking, she goes, I thought it was dying down. And I said, no, I think it's like it's a lot here right now. And she's like, then why aren't we like still, like wearing masks or doing things? And I was like, well, you can, like, nobody's telling you not to. I said, but the thing is, they're not reporting on that stuff anymore. So everybody just like, okay, like, right. Like, but that's the power of the media. Because if the media was coming down our throats like they were at the beginning, we would all be like, oh, like, but everybody's like, nah, it's fine because we're not talking about it.
No, yeah, exactly.
Doesn't mean it's not there.
No, it's definitely, I think it's still going to be here for many
Many
years.
years, but we're not as fearful anymore. We're like,
Yeah,
okay,
and we have uh, uh, medicine for it. What is
yes, yeah,
what is,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, do you know what I mean?
yes, yeah.
What's
So
the word?
vaccine,
Vaccines. Thanks. As you were, sorry.
if you want to choose to do, then you have that option. But I just feel like there's less fear now, and I was just kind of seeing that parallel with the media. And how maybe because I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, like levels here in Canada, actually, the numbers were actually lower compared to the following year. Like 2021 was when we had more, but you wouldn't have known that because it was less reported, actually. So it actually was, there was more to fear, but we didn't feel as fearful because we weren't being inundated with information.
Or the people, I think they said too that the people who passed away were automatic, like during the pandemic, were kind of automatically thrown into that pile of people who passed away from COVID, even though they may have not necessarily passed away from
They
that.
might have had another problem.
Yeah, it could have been other, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's the power of the word and, things being said and what we choose to believe. And yeah, that's a whole other thing we won't get into it.
Whole other
But
thing.
yeah, it's just an example of how you can see, hysteria.
I think how fear kind of grows, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Or even, where there's like how that divided us as a society in some way, and certain groups were kind of targeted as being the outliers on society, right? Like, yeah, and then it's like, one, I'm better than you because you can see how that worked out. It's similar. This is the witch archetype in
It's just, yeah, it's like fear based.
your base. Yeah. So let's go to Wicca. So Wicca, Wicca, it's actually, I think
Wicca.
it's Wicca. This comes from history.com. And I'm fascinated with this now. The more I'm learning, I'm like, whoa, I'm super fascinated. I've also realized through my little bit of brief education on this last week that I was also working through a lens of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, there was a level of me also being conditioned to what exactly witchcraft. And it's funny because a couple weeks ago, somebody said to me, I sent a friend something, like a meme or whatever, something about witches. And then she goes, but I wouldn't call you a witch. And I was like, she goes, you don't like do black magic and stuff like that. And I'm like, no, I guess not. I guess I'm not a witch. And then I reflected on that and I go, yeah, I am a witch, right? Like that's the stereotype. That's the conditioning of like, what exactly is a witch?
That it's evil.
Yes. Like, so if somebody was like, do you practice witchcraft? I'd be like, no, because I don't I don't do spells and I don't do things like that. But I'm just like, but I am, because I communicate with spirit and because I am empowered and because I know the thought creates. That's a spell in itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or when you even like they say like when you blow candles out on a cake, that's actually a form of
Yeah.
witchcraft.
Yes.
You're making a wish.
Yeah.
You're like, you have a candle, you're
Absolutely. Yeah. That's all that's all spell work. Like, right. Like if you were, like abracadabra.
Yeah. It's actually be interesting. I wonder where that anyways, another time we could talk about it, but yeah, yeah. Interesting where maybe the cake or like, the candle and the cake where that came from.
Mm-hmm. So, Wicca, history.com. Many modern day witches in the Western world practice Wicca, which is an official religion in the United States and Canada. Wicca is a modern day nature based pagan religion. Wicca is considered a modern interpretation of pre Christian traditions, although some claim a direct link to the ancient practices. It may be practices by individuals or members of a group. So, members of a group are often called covens. Wiccans avoid evil and the appearance of evil at all costs. Their motto is harm none, and they strive to live in a peaceful, tolerant, and balanced life in tune with nature and humanity. This is where the wheels started to go, wait a second. Wait 1 second. Maybe this is me. The beliefs that they have, I'm just like, yes, these are my beliefs, right? Rituals in Wicca often include holidays centered around phases of the moon, solar equinoxes, and solstices, and the elements. Wicca was given the name by Gerald Gardner, considered the founder of Wicca in the 1954 book Witchcraft Today. According to Gardner, the word was derived from Scots English and meant wise people or wise woman. I've seen it quoted as both. Gardner's novel High Magic Aid is considered one of the first standards of Wicca, but his Book of Shadows, which was a collection of spells and rituals, is central to Wiccan practice. So this is also called Book of Shadows. It's not that book, though. Okay. Doreen Valente, I think you've mentioned her before.
Yes.
Yes. She met
I
Gardner.
have one of her books.
Yes, in 1952, and under his direction, she revised the Book of Shadows for more popular consumption. Valente went on to become a prominent Wiccan advocate and scholar. Wiccans celebrate several seasonal festivals of the year known as Sabbats. Like we're coming up on, I never know how to pronounce it, Samhain?
Samhain? Yeah,
Samhain? Something like
Samhain.
that. Yeah.
I have the pronunciation in my notes.
Do you know? Yeah. Yeah, in this book. So this book I have in my hand. So after I was doing all this research, I'm like, whoa, like something in me kind of went, ooh, like this is something you should look into. And so I bought this book, also called The Book of Shadows. It's by Phyllis Carrot. I had a little bit of a fangirl moment this week because I shared in my Instagram stories that I was reading this, and she thanked me. She liked the story and she shared it on her page, and I was like, "Oh my god, Phyllis Carrot! She is said to be the first kind of out and about witch."
Ooh,
And
that is so cool.
so this is called A Modern Woman's Journey into the Wisdom of Witchcraft and the Magic of the Goddess. So she is an attorney. Okay, she didn't have any previous religion, spirituality background, nothing. She moved to New York and in the 70s at some point, and as a young woman, and was trying to climb up the legal ladder. And she began to have these intuitions. Things started to happen. And she describes in the beginning of the book where she got up one morning, she looked out the window, busy downtown New York. Across the street, there was an ambulance, body bag, somebody going into the thing. And she heard somebody's name very clearly. Later on, she leaves the apartment, runs into somebody else in the apartment who then says, "Oh, poor whatever his wife's name was. He passed this morning." Was the voice that she heard. So things started to happen to her. Dreams. She kept dreaming about Isis, okay, the goddess. She kept dreaming about her. Right?
That's my girl.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think you would really like this. So this is
I would too.
her story of how she woke the magic within her and how she found the witches of New York. And so
Cool.
it's her kind of biography, and I think you would love it. It's really good. I'm not even done it, and I'm already.
Also adding that to my Goodreads.
I think you would love it. And it's the kind of book I think that you want to have for yourself. So this is the 20th anniversary edition. So it came out in 1998. I just love it. I think it's amazing. So she just through the magic of synchronicities. Here, I want to read you something in the beginning of this book. This is where I felt like I know we're getting close to time, but I felt like I was invested at this point. So she says, this is coming from the Book of Shadows by Phyllis Carrot. Magic. It happens to all of us, seemingly out of nowhere and beyond all expectations. The extraordinary happens. Your heart's hidden longing appears. Something strange and unimagined manifest. You've been shown that there's more to the world, yourself, and your destiny than what you've been taught to believe is possible. Now anything is possible. Magic is possible. We're conditioned to disbelieve and deny the reality of magic. We're discouraged from seeing the cage-rattling, soul-making, world-remaking power that is an essential part of who we really are. Negative stereotypes stand between us and enchantment. We doubt that we're more powerful than we can imagine, or we fear that such power will do more harm than good. The door to our heart's holy wisdom, to the realm of spirit and creation's embodied divinity has opened, but we don't enter. We turn around and get on with life as usual. The Book of Shadows is the story of what happened when I stepped through that door. I don't know. As soon as I read it, I'm like, oh, I'm into this book. Yeah, it speaks to me. So it was through a series of synchronicities and weird connections that she found this group, the Witches of New York. She was recognized by them very soon. You know how like a witch recognizes another, right? Like I always say, like sometimes I'm doing a reading and I go, "Oh, you're one of us," and I don't mean a witch, like an intuitive, right? Like somebody.
Yeah,
You can feel
you
it.
see too. You see.
You can feel it and you can see it, and I love it because she talks about a little bit of this in the book. But there's she says throughout this intro quite a few times, like why we show up in the world, why we need to be public, why we need to stand in our truth. And she repeats over and over again, because the world needs her witches. Like she ends a few different paragraphs with, because the world needs her witches. And I don't know, but when I read it, I was like, oh my God, yes.
It's so true. Like when you think about how, like just from maybe a spirit standpoint, that Earth is like one of those places where we don't believe we can telepathically communicate. We don't believe we can manifest or create the change we want for ourselves. We are kind of limited here in that sense, but I totally agree that I feel like the more people kind of hopped on the train, the higher that, that energy would be raised, and we would kind of have that veil a little bit thinner, and maybe we would start to really see, that magic that is within us and always has been within us.
I believe it. And I often have said something similar, in the sense that in the spirit world, my interpretation of, communicating with spirit is that we can manifest instantly. It's like, okay, I'm going to go to Erin and I'm going to go to Amy at the same, okay, yeah, I'm there. I'm going to go here. I'm there. Like this here, man, like thought creates, I think it's there from a spiritual perspective. And so at a soul level, we have that remembrance, that we have that ability. But I think that we come to earth to remember that when we have so much to make us forget, to cause us to forget, and that we still can manifest. Thought still does create. It just takes time. It's not instant. And I think that we can get frustrated, right? And we grow impatient because we're like, it's not here and I asked for it. But in hindsight, if you look back, I think eventually something comes and you're like, there it is. And the more that you like enable that, like embody that magic and that belief in your life, I think it begins to happen quicker and quicker and quicker.
Well, and I also think too, like if you were to, let's say, if you were to do your own spell, or if you were to do something where you put it out there and you've asked for it, right? I have heard stories of people like asking for it, and then they're like, oh, I don't know if I want this now. It comes and you're like, oh, maybe it's not the time, right? So I always am reminded of, and I've heard this just from other witches, is that if you want to ever do spell work, always put that intention out there of like, I'm asking for this, but I trust that it will come when it's meant to come.
Yes, I agree. I agree. That's that relationship. So I have a quote I want to read, but first, because we were just talking about the Sabbats, she's got this in the back here. I'm just going to really quickly run down. So it's called The Wheel of the Year. So Samhain or Samhain, yeah, October 31st, New Year's Eve, is the Celtic and contemporary Wiccan in the Celtic and contemporary Wiccan calendar. It's the night when the veil between the worlds is thinnest, when the spirits of our ancestors are honored as they visit with us. Then we got Yule, December 21st, right? Imbolc, is it Imbolc? I
Oh,
think.
I don't know. I've never heard of this
February
one.
2nd means in the belly in Gaelic and is the holiday that celebrates the first evidence of the return of life. It is also the holy day of the Celtic goddess Brigid. February 2nd.
Oh.
Um, I don't know how to pronounce these. Ostera, that's Easter, right? I think, or March 21st. Spring or vernal equinox, the holy day when light and dark are in balance. Beltane, May 1st, is also known as May Eve when celebrated the evening before, and May Day when celebrated on the 1st. It's the holiday in which the young goddess and god first encounter and fall in love with each other. Because Wiccan is about honoring the god and the goddess. So this old,
Duality.
yeah, the old religion, as it's often called, because it's said to predate Catholic, like Christian,
Well, it
Judaism,
comes
all of
from
everything.
paganism.
Right. It's the original. And it's interesting to see how the other religions have taken from from the pagan.
Oh, 100%. And you're going to see that too when we go into next week's episode. Talk a little bit about that too.
Okay, amazing. So, and in this book also, like I'm not reading it, but she also in each paragraph about each thing will compare we'll show the parallel within what we know now with the church, like the Christianity holidays and how they're the same. Litha is June 21st, summer solstice. I don't know how to pronounce this. Lugnasad, August 1st. It's the first harvest celebration in which we give thanks for the fruits of the earth. And then we've got Maven. Please, somebody tell me how to pronounce these things. September 21st, which is the autumn equinox, in which the light and dark are again in perfect balance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I love this book so much. I'm going to end with a really quick little paragraph, and then if you have anything to say, if you just want to chat about something. So it says, witches seek to live with reverence, respect, gratitude, and attention to the embodied divinity of the world within which we live and that lives within us. The witch has always been and will always be the witch, the witcha, the wise one, the seer of the sacred, the shaman who travels between the worlds of spirit and earth and who knows that those worlds are one. Makes me emotional as I read this. I don't know why. Yeah.
Because there's truth. I feel like you feel that truth in it.
I feel the truth. I feel the truth when I read certain things. And yeah, that's, yeah. When I started doing this research, I'm like, this is truth for me. This is truth.
Amy, that was fantastic. I hope our listeners also just like felt that and felt the truth maybe in their own way. And yeah, it was amazing.
I loved that it had me reframing and questioning my own conditioning. I feel I'm like, I'm an open minded person. I don't have any judgments about anything, and then you do this work and you're like, or this, you start researching things, you're like, obviously I have, because why would I bristle if somebody said, oh, are you a witch? Or do you practice witchcraft? And be like, no. What? Yes, I do. It's just for me, believing in the divinity of myself and in others, seeing the sacredness of everything, the interconnectivity of everything. That is witchcraft. Like that is what it is.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I would say that's definitely. I would think that's part of it.
But yeah, like I know obviously there's spells and things like that, but those things have been so sensationalized, right? Like, yes, there are people that actually do those things, right? You see them all over. People in shops and people have Instagram accounts where they're literally doing all that stuff. But like, I don't think you need to do that stuff to be a witch. A witch is just a wise woman who understands, what did I say? Her power to destroy, but also to create. Understanding and being empowered in that you create the world, your life as it is it's manifests from you, right? Like that's the power within. I think that's what it's all about. That's self-sovereignty. And the transformation message that came up like a lot with the witch archetype, and I think that's what it is too, is like realizing the working with shadow, right? Like the book of shadow, right? Like, or your own shadow, which is also a Jungian term of taking the things that maybe didn't work out or you felt shame or embarrassed about, and then transmuting it into something. And I think about, like we said, untamed, the untamed woman, and I brought up Glennon Doyle. Sometimes I'll refer to people, like Glennon Doyle or Brene Brown or even Oprah Winfrey, these women that we look to like, they're like vulnerability experts, right? But why? It's because they share things that aren't exactly things that we all want to share. It's usually the things that we would keep inside and hidden because we're like, I don't want to be judged, but they freely share it. And then it becomes empowering. And then they take the power back from that experience and they use it to help somebody else. And that's the witch. Um, that's the wise woman. That's the one that can transmute and alchemize something negative into something positive and helpful and beautiful.
Yeah. I guess I just wanted to bring it up because I know there are people definitely out there who do practice witchcraft, and it is like, yeah. Um, but I love it. I think I've talked about it on the podcast once. Like I participated in an open coven once, and that was just like the most empowering thing ever. And it was all just about releasing. And I went there because I went through like a bad breakup, and I was like, I need to just like let this go. And it was fantastic. It was amazing. And I was surrounded with a group of women, self-identified women, and it was just this beautiful moment of just coming together and putting energy out there, and we were all kind of there to release something. It was beautiful. It was fantastic. I left there. I was tired, but I was energized. It was almost like after I leave a reading. It was
So
fantastic.
did you feel like you released it after? Like, did you feel lighter?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
It's the magic of community, right? And coming together as
That's what it is.
magic coming together as a community and just releasing and sharing and being vulnerable and being human.
Yes,
I love it. Okay. Thanks for being here, guys. I hope you
that was
have a
great.
wonderful day, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
If you like what you're hearing, don't forget to give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast and tune in each week as we dish on all things spiritual.
Don't forget to like, comment on what you would like to hear us talk about next, and subscribe.